Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about this ongoing health scare that's plaguing the whole globe. Countries are dealing with it in lots of different ways, including the lockdown we currently have in a lot of the United States of America. Other countries are taking similar precautions, and today we're going to focus on talking about a couple of Scandinavian nations. This northeastern European area has been known to be pretty progressive and what I would call regressive in a lot of ways, and the lockdown situation is something that's come up there too. Now, a couple of the other countries have chosen to lock down, but one in particular who we've discussed on this channel multiple times, Sweden has refused to lock down, and it appears they're certainly paying for it with the lives of their people. They've had a lot of extra deaths because they're not enforcing lockdowns and proposing social distancing properly enough. And the difference between those nations really shows this has become an issue because people have brought up Sweden as a supposed positive example of why lockdowns aren't needed. But if you look at the numbers and if you read the tweets and the information out there, that appears to not be true. Now, before we get started, this whole lockdown situation is different in every region, in every country. So I understand there's some people who are against lockdowns currently in America because they're sick of them and they have every right to feel that way. But in some areas, it might be more needed where it's more dangerous and where the virus is spreading harsher and in more places, like say New York City. They shouldn't be not locking down anytime soon. But other regions that have no deaths or any kind of issue, they should be able to consider reopening. But that's a discussion for a different video. Today we're going to focus on this whole Sweden story. Let me go ahead and bring up my tweet here. This is a quote from Donald J. Trump. He says, "Despite reports to the contrary, Sweden is paying heavily for its decision not to lock down. As of today, over 2,000 people have died there, a much higher number than the neighboring countries of Norway, Finland, or Denmark, which only have a few hundred each. The United States made the correct decision, according to our president." And I have to say, I pretty much agree with that. Like I said before, there is a little bit of a complication there, and our country is a lot bigger, and we have lots of different states that could consider reopening. But as far as locking down everything, I think this was the right move. I think this might have saved a lot of lives. And certainly if you compare these Scandinavian country numbers, you can see the effects of it. These countries are all very similar, very close together in that area of Europe. And yeah, the differences are pretty dramatic. Over 2,000 down in Sweden is a bad sign, and it's one of the most dangerous countries right now because of this. So this just goes to show how these lockdowns are effective. They're certainly making things better, helping, separating people, but at the same time, there is that argument, when are the lockdowns become worse than the virus? And that's where things go further, but we're not talking much about that today. We might get to that in another video. For now, let's switch to another article. I got this tweet here from someone named Shanker, and they said, "Sweden records deadliest week of century after resisting lockdowns." This is a New York Post article, so let's go ahead and read into that and get some more details. Sweden recorded its deadliest week of the 21st century after controversially resisting coronavirus lockdown measures, according to a report. At least 2,505 Swedes died between April 6 and April 12, amounting to 358 fatalities per day, Swedish outlet The Local reported. It's important to clearly state that these are preliminary statistics and that the death toll, especially for the most recent weeks, will be revised upward, said Thomas Johansson of Statistics Sweden, a government agency that compiled the figures. The recent spike in fatalities comes as the country refused to implement containment measures to stop the spread of the virus. Right there is a good lot of information, more support from the actual Swedish sources, showing that they're having an issue. And we got to keep in mind, this isn't that big of a country either. So 2,500 people for them going down would be like maybe 20,000 in America. I'm not sure the exact ratio there, but there's only like a couple million people in each of these Scandinavian countries. I know Norway has 5 million people. Sweden might be similar to that. And America, of course, we have 300 million. So we're talking about a totally different rating and level of country. So this number is actually more dramatic than you might think in a small country. This is also something that, again, is not really too surprising since we've seen over the years that Sweden has been run down and controlled by some really radical leftists who are ruining the place there. We've covered them before in a number of videos. The first one that comes to mind is the whole Sweden raising their kids without gender video we covered. It was like a Vice video that went over this family that was being super progressive, trying to raise their kids without being a male or female. But we see over time, and if you watch the video and you watch other instances of this, really the thing is they're trying to raise them not to be male. So they have boys and they raise them as girls, and then girls can stay as girls. It's an anti-male thing, and that's where it all breaks down to, especially in that situation. But overall, I think we all know Sweden is one of the most terrible SJW crap holes in the whole planet. They're really progressive and they're really ruining things there. They've done things like increase their immigration, which has caused more crime, more abuse, more terrible situations. And they also have places like that are totally covered in these immigrants that they can't even send the cops anymore because they've taken over small parts of big cities. And it's really gone downhill there. And this is just another sign of things to come, because they're not locking down. Why aren't they locking down? Well, I don't have a specific reason here yet, but I would guess it has something to do with the leftists running things and doing a terrible job of taking care of the country. That's first and foremost. But on top of that, I could probably think of some kind of progressive angle to this, like lockdowns are racist, or they could say lockdowns are sexist or something. They're trying to be different and trying to be in with this liberal agenda, and that's why they're failing, much like how other liberal-led places fail too. We've seen that in America. Actually, back to New York City. New York City is our worst hit place right now, and that's a liberal-led city. We've gone over how de Blasio has ruined that city, and he's a liberal leader there who has been picking favorites over groups, doing lots of offensive racist things while trying to not be racist, which is ironic. But that just goes to show liberal-run places are taking this worse because they can't handle it. They're not really prepared to lead. They don't have experience. All they care about is not looking racist or making people like minorities propped up. Like Sweden is probably more worried about bringing in people from the Middle East than they are about taking care of their own people and just locking down and stopping the virus. Looks like we got some pictures here and then more of the article. The government has called for citizens to hold themselves accountable for social distancing instead of ordering lockdowns, Agence France-Presse reported. The authorities and the government stupidly did not believe that the epidemic would reach Sweden at all, Bo Lundback, professor of epidemiology at the University of Gothenburg, told the outlet. Sweden has recorded more than 19,000 confirmed cases as of Tuesday morning, resulting in 2,355 deaths, according to Johns Hopkins University. By comparison, Sweden's Nordic neighbors, Denmark, Norway, Finland, have recorded just 400, 200, and 199 deaths, respectively, as of Tuesday afternoon. Okay, well, that's a little bit of information we saw in Donald Trump's tweet before, but it still stands true, and it still goes to show this article is supporting that and just showing that these other neighbors of Sweden that locked down are doing pretty good, all things considered. Now, any deaths are bad. Of course, we don't want anyone to be hurt or dying from this, but if you can lower that number by a couple thousand, that's certainly worth it. And this is going to show that the lockdowns should have probably been implemented there in a lot of places. And it also goes to show the naivete of them, because they really thought they weren't going to get the virus. I mean, is that even reasonable at this point? I think everyone should be prepared for that, at least now, at least maybe even a couple months ago. I know February, people were still on the fence, didn't know how it was going to go. But right now, we should be changing things. Sweden should be changing their tune. They should be updating their policies there and trying to do whatever they can to fix this. But I'm not sure it's going to happen anytime soon, because we do seem to be past the worst of this, but not to speak too soon. It could come back in another wave in December, but a lot of people are talking about the curve being flattened because of these lockdowns. That's why they're starting to reintroduce opening places, like a lot of sections of America are considering that. We've heard protesters in Michigan trying to get their state reopened. Other places are extending lockdowns depending on the severity of things, and that's a case-by-case basis that we have to deal with too. But I think the choice by Sweden to not lock anything down at all was certainly a poor one. They needed to lock down right away, and if they wanted to lessen up on it quickly, that would have been a different case. But they could have at least locked down for a week or two or something. I mean, what's the point of trying to hold your ground there and stop things when really they could have saved a lot of lives? I guess maybe you could argue they wanted to keep their economies going. They want to keep everything open and running, but that could be a reason the things spread so bad. The stuff spreads person to person. Places that are busy, places like restaurants, stores, all kinds of public things. You see this picture in the video right here where these people are at the park. I mean, they're all spread out, but eventually these guys are going to rub shoulders and bump into each other, and that's how this thing spreads. And one thing that's particularly worse in a country like Sweden is it's a very cold country, and these things spread worse in colder areas. Now, that's why another reason why things might be getting better here in America and other places that are heating up as we get towards the summer. The summer will start to attack the disease and make it not spread as quick. It can't go as far in the air in a hot weather. But Sweden is cold pretty much all year round. I mean, I'm not sure the specifics offhand, but it's a very northern country that's always cold, always snowy. So even more a reason to lock things up, at least for a little bit. If they felt they could release and open things up sooner, that's great. I would love for them to have a good experience with this. I have no ill will against Sweden. Sweden actually is a pretty cool country historically. They've produced some very good players in our history. They have really pretty models. They're like a really good looking group of people that has produced some beautiful women and men, I'm sure. And this is just sad to see them fall down this SJW hole. I'm not sure this has a lot to do with that. I don't see a lot of like progressive lines in this. There's no SJW, this is racist to lock down specifically. I wouldn't be surprised if it was there. I wouldn't be surprised if that came up if you looked further into this. But at the very least, you could say the leftists in charge of that country are mishandling things, like how they've mishandled many other things in other areas of the world, including some of the bigger cities in the United States. Thanks for your time today, guys. That wraps up today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below and tell me what you think about this story. And also, hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. That really helps this thing spread and get shared, and that way everyone can hear the good news from NoBS. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you on the other side.